Welcome everybody. My name is Rob Brown. I'm honored to be your host today for another panel of global influencers in the accounting space. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a moment so you can see who we're playing with today, but we are in crazy times. This is unusual. Accountants and their ilk deal with certainty, and that is the very opposite of what we have right now. So we are getting these leaders together who manage and oversee and give governance to global accounting networks, associations, alliances, and they're at the very cutting edge of the frontline services that are keeping the businesses and individuals going in these tough times. So we're going to ask a few questions today to dip into the situation, talk about a few interesting topics, and I'm going to invite the panelists right now just to introduce themselves. Terry, we're going to start with you. You're my top left, so over to you, sir.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that, Rob. I'm Terry Snyder. I'm the current CEO of Millennial Global, but retiring in another 2 months, and then I'm going to hang around here for another year to help them do the transition. So been doing this since '08. So.
Okay, and are you leaving big footprints, Terry? Who's following in your wake?
Mark Koziel, who's the executive VP at the AICPA. So he's came out of bed like 100 candidates. I didn't know 100 people wanted this job. So my wife didn't know that it was that valuable. So I can tell you that. 100
candidates. Goodness me. That's okay. Well, he's got some tough shoes to fill. It's great to have you here. Paul Spindler, welcome.
Hi. Nice to see you all. So my background, a little bit about my background. I'm an accountant and tax advisor, UK. I was a partner in Kings & Smith, which is a reasonably large firm in London. For about 8 years, and prior to that I was ABG, which is one of the members of EAI International, which is how I got involved in this. So I've been doing this for about 18 months. I didn't really expect to be doing everything on video conference within 18 months, but I seem to now have that pleasure. They brought me on board. Obviously we're much smaller than the other three guys that are on here in terms of numbers of members, etc. But what they wanted to do was professionalize the association and get new members. So that's basically my role. It's an interesting learning experience when you compare an association with a professional practice. My experience is all with the professional practice and being a partner in that, and this has been quite a change.
Well, it's super to have you with us. Lisa, welcome back. You are a bundle of inspiration and you always add some value to what we're doing. So it's great to have you with us. But for benefit of people that don't know you, a little introduction, please.
Thank you very much, Rob. So Lisa Robbins, Chief Executive, Creston International. We're a top 15 global network of accounting firms. I've worked in this type of role at both Creston and also at an association for just over 10 years. And prior to that, I worked typically at larger corporates where I was responsible for international expansion. And I think to give you some inspiration, I've decided I've come very reflective in lockdown. I think we all have. And I think as we get older, I found a benefit of that too now. It gives us some perspective. And although I've never sort of lived through a pandemic before, I was recalling just recently with people that I work for a business that was wiped out overnight by the Kobe earthquake in Japan. I then went on, worked across Asia, setting up a distribution network, a tremendous amount of work. And that was just before the Asian financial currency crisis hit. I worked in Hong Kong during SARS. So while I'm acutely aware that some people's lives will never recover from where we are, or indeed those other situations I've mentioned, my message is for most of us and most of the people, there's a great future out there, but we've just got to believe and share some good thinking. So that was a bit of inspiration already, Rob.
It sounds great. Sounds also, though, that wherever you go, you're a bit of a jinx, Lisa. These things happen, don't they?
You think so? I think. Thanks for inviting me back on a call, though.
I know, indeed. And Clive, Terry said he's kind of shuffling off and doing some other things, but you've been in this game a long time, haven't you?
Well, not that long. 10 years in this world of associations, networks. I have a very bizarre career background. As you know, my first career was in the House of Commons running a select committee. Then I ended up running a shipping company. And then I had my own business each time for about a decade. And I've been in this business for a decade. So I'm heading towards retirement in a couple of years. I'm envious of you, Terry, but we're losing a great name, a famous name from the world of networks and associations. And I'm quite envious and I wish you well with that. And I have to say, Lisa, I'm very impressed by that bit of your CV. It sounds pretty exciting stuff, but I agree with your sentiment. So, yeah.
Well, it is great to have you all with us and talking and collaborating. We appreciate in some areas you are in competitive situations, but I've been really overwhelmed with the inclination of leaders like yourselves to give up some time to share insights and open up your doors and secrets, if you like, because we are trying to be a force for good in the midst of huge change. So the first question I want to ask you all, and I'm going to start with you, Clive, if I may, is what's keeping you strong? Because you are holding networks, associations, alliances, communities together. They are leaning into you at this tough time for all kinds of things, a lot of which won't just be technical. You are psychotherapists and counselors and psychiatrists and coaches and mentors and everything else. And like a battery, you do get drained. So I want to ask you all about mental strength and resilience. As leader of leaders, Clive, what keeps you strong, and where do you draw your energy from?
Well, I mean, first, I think that you're being a little lyrical, that we are the leader of leaders, or I speak for myself, and that we're having to keep. I do think that the firms that are our members, some of them are facing seriously tough existential problems, which is, not the case of MGI Worldwide. We're in a very strong position, so that I don't face those problems which I've had in the past in other businesses, where you wake up at night wondering how you're going to pay the staff or pay our other suppliers and keep the business going. Good point, yeah. We do, having said that, and certainly in the first few months, it was very much of a focus of how do we help our members get together and exchange experiences to know how to deal with the existential crisis. Cash, for goodness sake, it is about cash, or was, and now is looking. How do we help them move into the next stage? But obviously, I suppose the other thing is that I, like several of us, I'm used to working from home. I mean, I'm actually, as you can tell, although our head office is supposedly in London, I'm actually based in Portugal, and I'm out in the middle of the countryside, and it's not very different from my usual life. The big difference is I'm not in an airplane or a hotel, which I have to say for me is a great relief. So I think that in terms of resilience, I mean, if you like, the stress is how can we help them? Because there are people, some of our members going through a really tough time, and the stress there is how can we do actually something that's useful rather than merely administrative or just sort of rah, let's all get together. And we've been focusing very much on that.
Yeah, I am going to ask about how you support your firms, but Lisa, you must understand that when you have members calling you up and they're talking about problems and the tough times that they're going through, it can be very draining for you. So you're a very positive person, but you must feel your battery levels going down at sometimes. Where do you draw strength from, and what keeps you going?
I think, as you said, for me personally, I'm sort of born on the sunny side of the street, so I tend towards optimism. And just because of my career, I've been always working in the greenfield sites, expansion plans, the launches. I'm used to dealing in great uncertainty, and my personality will thrive on it, because from uncertainty, you always get the opportunities. But of course, as Clive said, there are also some very serious issues our firms are facing. But I think what's been interesting is this whole concept of mental health. I think in a positive way in the past, before COVID, was coming very much and correctly recognised as one of the biggest issues executives at our level, the firms that we represent, suffer from. And before it was buried, and now it's not. And I think COVID's done more to say it's okay not to be okay. Mm-hmm. And I think that is desperately important. But in terms of me, I mean, I may sound glib saying I'm very, very positive. Actually, COVID really has made me think, because of everything you've said. Yeah. I think the first thing you have to do, if you are in any position of leadership or management, and this is going to sound horribly selfish, you must look after yourself first, because you can't lead a team. You can't be positive. You can't be inspirational if you're feeling rotten. And it sounds selfish. So personally, my own story, I think this is true of many people. I've eaten better during COVID. I walk more, like Clive. I'm not on a plane anymore, which has definitely improved my health. This fantastic office I'm sitting in, at 7 o'clock most every other morning, it's a dance studio, and I think that's great. And I have other people in my family who've been severely affected in their businesses. Sadly, they don't join my dance studio, but they're upskilling themselves in skills, that they're learning some technology skills. So I think you do have to start by looking after yourself. And I personally have taken that very, very seriously. And that's why I feel good at the moment. And I feel I can be a listening ear for my firms and a friend to them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Terry, you would probably concur with that. You've had longevity in this business, but goodness me, you must be facing some tough calls and emotional commercial decisions in emotional circumstances right now. Where do you draw strength and inspiration from?
Well, it's been, if you think about this, accountants are always the pragmatic people. They think that when this first hit, that the first thing we received was a bunch of information that, what's going to happen with our membership? What about this? What about that? But what they've all forgotten is accountants are in a very unique position of being a trusted advisor. And the minute, I went back to 9/11, I went back to the 07, 08, 09 financial crisis. Accountants were in demand. And because of that trusted advisor role, they bring together financial, they understand the family matters, they understand all those components even as individuals. And so I reminded them that this is the time that you really take advantage of the situation and you really put yourself forward. I reminded my team it's time to create value. In fact, we've not fallen off a bit. And always the biggest scares, are they going to pay their dues? Okay, good question, by the way. And so we went about the process of creating value. We went about the process of staying in touch with our members. And we've even gone to the process of where we continue to expand. So now the big question is, I did all the work. Am I going to get paid? And I said, well, you get paid. You're going to get paid whether or not, if this were the epidemic, the pandemic or not, you're going to get paid because you create value and because you're needed. And so we've had several firms that I talk to on a daily basis that have even gotten larger, stronger, faster, quicker. They're picking up better talent as there's being talent let go for the people who are panicking. They're finding more business opportunities with all the rules and laws changes. And they're finding strength. We set up what we call global work groups. We broke our world into 16, 8, 9, 10 people with a facilitator so they can discuss their problems. They've elected to keep those groups in place so they can continue to talk and discuss things well past what we would consider the slowdown on what's going on. So value was key. I agree with Lisa. Being positive is hugely key. This is just another hurdle. The biggest thing, Rob, I found out, which was the most exciting, is they crammed 3 years of I'm going to be virtual, I'm going to use all these great tools into 3 weeks. And now we've got people talking about how they're going to run their offices differently, how they're going to approach their people differently, and using Zoom, using Teams. There's 1,000 little pieces out there now. So I think it's a time of opportunity. And I think it's a time for associations, networks to step up and drive forward and produce the value that they need. We're back in our offices working full time, getting stuff done. My day is busier than it's ever been. So from early morning to late at night, just people wanting to move forward. And, but once again, accountants always say, I did all that work. Am I going to get paid? Well, come on, guys. Let's see. The next foot's not going to fall that way. So the next foot is, can I continue to provide value? Am I going to continue to be valuable as a trusted advisor to my clients? It's going to expose the weak links, and it's going to be a benefit to the people who are much stronger. They're all going to look a little different next year. And we've already talked about changing our meetings, to more virtual meetings. Our last virtual meeting went spectacularly. I can't tell you. We're doing the next one that way. I do believe, however, it's going to become our process of figuring out how to do some in person and some virtually. So, accountants like shiny new toys, and so they're always making changes, but they need to not change too much because there's always somebody got their foot in the mud a little bit. So it's been fun. I think this has been a great time. We're having a great adventure here today and doing some new things, and so we're getting excited about it. I side with Lisa. It's time for optimism. It's time for fun right now. This has really been fun for us. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you've answered about 15 questions I was going to ask there. So, Terry Snyder for president.
Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll mute myself.
A little bit of enthusiasm is great. Paul, where are you drawing your strength from in these uncertain times?
Well, I mean, I have to say that in March and April, it was very quiet, to be honest. A lot of people were just purely concentrating on their own business and the issues that Clive said about cash management, etc. That was driving people forward. Well, what I did find interesting was amongst the membership, obviously there's some younger firms that already were 90% virtual, and for them to make that extra 10% jump was very, very easy. Then there's some what I would call more legacy firms where you know the firm's been around for a long time, they've got their set procedures in place. For them, it's been much more difficult. I'll give you an example. Some of the guys in Italy, although they were quite dynamic and made the change, their big problem was there were no laptops for sale in Italy. Laptops are completely run out. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they had that type of issue. What I think a point Terry made is about opportunity is that some of our members are now being approached by, let's say, one-man band type firms who basically said, I've had enough. I don't want to do this anymore. You know, do you want to acquire my client base? And I think that's a very interesting opportunity and something where as associations perhaps we can help because, you know, those opportunities might flow around the association. The other thing that I think associations are going to do in the future perhaps is, you know, with audit work, for example, it's quite difficult to travel around. So you might be more reliant upon another member.
We're going to touch on opportunities, Paul, and
okay.
What is coming up for sure. But we're asking where you get your inspiration.
Yeah, in terms of leadership, I think a lot of people ask me about my experience of being in a professional firm, because obviously I was there for a long time. And I'm more of a sounding board. I wouldn't consider myself a leader of leaders. It's not that type of role. It's a sounding board and what's your opinion on this? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. Well, in these uncertain times, we do have to stay mentally strong because the professions need a strong voice. They need strong leadership. It's not a time to go silent. And we have seen that this is not a good time for firms to isolate. So let's talk about support for our members. And Lisa, I'll come to you first on this one. Why is it important for professional firms to plug into a network, an association, an alliance? And what kind of things do you do for them that they would not get on their own?
Do you know what? I think now it's never been more important, the whole role of the associations and networks, because, of course, they bring together people from all over the world. And so our role's been, there's so many issues I can touch on. So, for example, when COVID just started to roll across the globe, we were very early in speaking to our firms in China, for example. We then went to Italy, we then went to Spain. And we were sending out sort of case studies and communications to our other firms who, you know, sadly knew it was coming, but maybe didn't know what to expect. And I think some of that gave them a bit of a heads up. I mean, of course, we all had a heads up, whether we listened or not, what was something. But I think we tried to say to people, look, you know, this is what the Italians are saying, this is what the Chinese are saying. So trying to pre-warn. I think also you talked about resilience. People tend to get their mental resilience from other people. I mean, everybody needs a support network. Sometimes that can be family, that can be friends, that can be community. And all these groups that we represent are a community, they're a professional community. And so, for example, I mean, Terry was talking about a virtual meeting. We had a fantastic virtual meeting the other week, and it was for our LATAM firms. Now, firms in Brazil at the moment are having a terrible time, and nearly 1 million deaths. I mean, it's devastating.
Yeah.
No, so my conversation with my colleague was a very empathetic one. You know, we showed we cared and we listened, and he was asking about what was happening in the UK. So there's all that support. Then there's practical support. I mean, all of us have probably pumped out webinars on business continuity. You've got experts in to talk to firms, and we're doing sharing. And where we are now is we're trying to get beyond that emergency. How do you get people working from home into being a bit more visionary and saying, look, let's start, because you can get into a cycle of negativity, and you can keep focusing on what you don't know. We'll do that. Focus on what you do know, and focus on what you can deliver. And so, and a lot of the things are looking at your client bases, looking at profitability, and seizing opportunities. So we've tried to change a little bit our communication from saying, come on, let's move ourselves forward through this. But I think the role that all of our groups play here is absolutely critical now, because our firms are not alone in any sense, emotionally or business.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And Paul, Lisa hints at it's getting them to put one foot in the now and deal with what's going on, but one foot in the next and strategic and looking forward. And that's a great way for you to stay relevant for them, isn't it? And offer support.
Absolutely. I mean, and like I said in the previous thing, when I got ahead of myself, people are now starting to look at opportunities and see where the growth is. And there will be plenty, because I think a lot of firms will sort of disappear slowly. The smaller firms, not the larger ones.
But some of that growth comes from being part of a network and association, doesn't it? And the opportunities that presents.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, March and April were very quiet, but since May, there's actually been a massive increase in the number of people who have been asking about joining the association. And I think it's because people are starting to think, well, I'm in my little bubble of being just an independent firm. It would actually be quite nice to get some ideas from other parts of the world, particularly, as Lisa said, this virus has spread across the globe and people have reacted in a very different way. And it's nice to think, oh, well, actually in China, they've already experienced, then in Italy, they've already experienced it. And, you know, I'm sitting here in Latin America and we're sort of in the middle of it still. So I think, yeah, lots of opportunities from joining an association on that. But
Clive, Paul mentions the E-word experience, and one of the reasons people join a network and alliance, something bigger than themselves, is they want to know what everyone else is doing and saying and thinking and what's happening to them and gaining experience from them. So that's a great way to offer support, isn't it, to your members?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Lisa, well, both Paul and Lisa, but I think what Lisa was saying is we've actually, I would say that our role for our members has deepened as a result of this crisis.
How do you mean?
Well, if you like, up till now, often for many members, being in a network was fundamentally about meeting other members at meetings, talking to them, having dinner, doing business with them, being supported when they do business exchange. I think that they've actually found that we have helped them with some of their more fundamental business problems by exchanging, by talking, by bringing in experts, by talking a lot of issues that perhaps we haven't talked about or they haven't been available to listen to. I think the other aspect of it, which I'm finding very interesting, and it's something, I mean, we've been working for 2 years very hard at what we call penetration, so trying to get deeper down into firms. Because, you know, at meetings you typically get managing partners and a few seniors, same old faces, and a lot of young talent, rising talent is not getting the real benefit of being a network. And now I'm finding we're getting much deeper into organizations. I mean, last week I had one webinar where there were 4 trainees from our firm in Cape Town. You know, these trainees. Yeah. And so we're actually being seen much more by firms as a whole instead of just the very top leadership as, oh, that's what we're part of. That's where we can get advice. And they are, as Lisa was mentioning, you know, someone in Brazil can hear what's going on to someone in Sydney or in Cape Town or in London, and can exchange ideas and can learn. And I think that they have found it very valuable. And I think that there is a kind of sense of loyalty, perhaps, of a different kind from before.
That's an excellent point. And Terry, it speaks of family, doesn't it? That loyalty, it's almost just being part of something that makes you relevant. That offers huge support to members in these troubled times.
Well, what Clive said is really the key, though. I think that as you speak about this, you realize that in your membership is a varied model. I mean, that's the difficulty. Is if, you know, when I worked for a major firm, we were talking about this the other day. I said, if they said you went to training, you just went to training. Okay, I mean, you didn't. Now, if we have membership, you'd say we're putting this program on. You kind of get to get volunteers. You know what I mean? I mean, you could have the best program in the world, but and so we compete a lot with the BDO Alliance and the RSM Alliance in the U.S. and our U.S. market. But the uniqueness of that, the other day they were talking about how many they had at the BDO thing, and I reminded the people, if BDO says to their partners, we're having a meeting in Las Vegas, they're all going, okay? There was no way out of that bag. So we got to it. I mean, and I think people have to, and so I see the media and I thought, you can't be that stupid. You realize if BDO says they had 3,000 at a meeting, you know, 29.99 are people that have to be there. Okay, they don't have a choice. When I was with McGladrey or Anderson, they said we're having a meeting in St. Charles. Guess where we all were the next day? Nobody said, "Oh, I can't go. I got to. My wife wants this or wants that." So we've got a different battle we have to fight. We have to create the value. We have to show our uniqueness. We have to be like Lisa. We have to be positive and show people what we can do. But ultimately we offer people, I think, a better solution than the other people do, because it's not a forced solution. It's a compromise solution where they can take those tools, those advantages, and use them to their advantage. And I really think I see that, and I think it's more fun. But getting back to what Clive said is, so we got some people who like being in the club. You know, I call that the managing partner group. They like the club, okay? Yeah. And now you got these new hungry lions coming up that. But we were talking the other day. We changed one of our biggest meetings from firm management conference to an ETC, which is basically the team conference, okay, the executive team conference, because more firms today are being run by a group, okay? And that's the new partner who looks at us and says, if I'm going to spend so much money with you, I need to get something back from it. And to get all those people engaged, they talk about ROI. By the way, those are the same people that were my startup partners were. That's what I preached to them while I went out and played golf. You know, you guys need to produce some work, and I'm going to go entertain clients. Okay, so that was kind of the difference. So that transitional membership now, partners who are in the club and like getting together and want to have that in-person socialization, they bring their wives, to these young hungry lions who are saying, I'm going to come to the meeting. Here's what I want. This is what I need. This is what I'm going to do. And when I leave, I want 3 pages of notes of things to get done. And so I think one of our biggest struggles in front of us is just that, is to produce value and to recognize what value means to one and one kind of firm, and what value will mean to the new emerging firm and how they're going to look in the future. It's a great project, but it's a difficult project for us to do. We spend a lot of time talking about, you know, when somebody will come to me with a firm problem, I'll say, okay, now who are we talking to and what are we talking about and what do you think their interest level is in it? Is it an interest of their own firm, of their own person, or, you know, is it the transitional leadership asking that question? Because it's just gotten more difficult. Now, do I think it's more fun? I'm with Lisa. It's absolutely more fun, because it makes your job challenging. Yeah. But on the other hand, it's a lot more complex than it used to be. And I think it's going to continue to get more complex in the future to create the kind of organization that focuses on ROI, that focuses on the newest tools and what's out in front of them, and to support them. Just like we're transitioning now to, there's all these accountants are talking about, we're going to be virtual, we're going to do this. We've got to support those people. Okay, even if they need it for 2 years while they play with their new toy and then start coming back to the situation. At the same time, I've got some of these more veteran firms saying, we want to get together. We still want to have a meeting. I want to see Clive. I want to see Paul. Okay, and so I think it's a great challenge. It's no different than anybody else having a business challenge, Rob. So every day the best companies go to work. They have business challenges. So every day we come to work, we have real business challenges in front of us today. Well, that makes it a lot more fun, I think. Yeah, definitely. And I've just written down these 2 words here. You're talking about value and ROI. It's clear that engagement in networks and associations is coming up. But I want to just put it out to the rest of you, just to come back on what Terry said. Value must come from relevance, right? The more relevant you can stay, the more value you can offer your members. So any final thoughts on that? How are you supporting that? How are you providing relevance and value?
I think we have to help our firms. You know, there are some of our firms, you know, some of the ones that Terry was speaking about, who are already ahead of this. I'm speaking to a firm yesterday who, you know, sort of smiled at me and said, you know, Lisa, we're doing great out of this. You know, and they felt slightly bad saying it, but they've been communicating. They're on top of it. They've got client bases that will afford them to get through this. But they're saying, you know we're going to probably be taking over some firms and some clients. But I think those that are suffering, and there are people who are, depending on their client base and the transformation stage of the firm, I think for them, we've got to inspire them, but also give them options. I mean, because we're not some passive membership group. I mean, we have, in our case, it's 200 firms across the world. That's 200 case studies. So at any one firm, you can probably find a case study for them and say, well, hold on, it is not hopeless. Let's just look at this. Let's look what this firm does. This firm outsourced, this firm merged, this firm back offices to a firm in wherever. As Terry said, these are everyday business issues in a funny way, in a dream way. And our role is to keep showing these live examples and driving them forward as we do our own businesses. And I think that keeps us very relevant, because all of us speak to our firms all over the world. Well, not every single one, but every day. We are learning something.
It's very good when we're showing them what's possible, aren't we?
Yeah, we're more relevant now than ever. In the good times, they probably don't need us as much. They can drive themselves. But this is where I think we come into our own.
Yeah,
I think what's interesting about associations generally is our job is to bring people together remotely, basically. I've done Zoom conferences for a long time, not as many as I'm currently doing, but I've done them for a long time. Yeah. But for most of the firms, it's very unusual. Everybody went to an office, and the issues about motivating staff and things like this, they're big issues for firms, and they're going to become more and more important. Whereas we're actually quite used to it because, like you said, we've spent a lot of time sitting on aeroplanes and various other forms of transport, and we get very limited time with people to actually be motivational and the rest of it. And I think this is something that we can actually, as an association, give a lot of value to the members of, well, this is how, you motivate people over a Zoom conference or any other video conference.
Yeah. Clive, you could detect it. Were you going to add something to that?
No, I was just going to say that I think it's interesting that in a way what's happening now, it's accelerated a process that was already going on. We'd begun to realize, I suppose, when I first got involved in this, our main job was viewed as helping members get business, help but amongst each other, helping them get referrals, helping them get into the international space in particular. More and more, certainly since we've been talking an awful lot about technology, because the technological change is vast. As Terry said right at the beginning, this crisis has accelerated that process. But we've been realizing for a while that our job is changing, and that our job is now not just about helping them get business, but it's about actually helping them to run their businesses. Because the truth is that the most wonderful accountants, like all professionals, whether they're lawyers, accountants, and doctors, are not necessarily the best people to run businesses. And often business practice and the way to run it, the way to use the technology, the way to use staff, the way to develop teams, and all of those things are areas where sometimes they are not necessarily the best place people do it. So actually, and they're often not aware of what really is going on. So our feeling is that our job in more and more is actually not just to help them get business, but help them to do the business, help them to run their practices. Yeah. And so this year, with this crisis, that's been very much a focus. How can we help you deal with the crisis? How can we help you use it for the opportunities? And how can we help you get out of this stronger?
Yeah, really good points. I'm detecting a lot of optimism and positivity in this group, and it's not untypical, because not only do you have to be that way, but you genuinely feel like this is a good time to be doing what you're doing. But let's talk about hope. Paul, I'll come to you first on this one. And there is failure around, there is anxiety around, there's uncertainty around, and we've talked a little about what's keeping you positive and focused, but where do you see the opportunities for growth and recovery for the people that you look after?
So as we've touched on as we've gone around this, I think there is going to be a lot of mergers. There are going to be a lot of businesses that cease to exist, and those businesses will look to be bought out or sell their client base. And the ones that don't, the clients will probably be moving anyway. I think the opportunities for the firms that are more dynamic and have adapted to this change quickly are enormous. I do think that there's definitely going to be an increase where you're going to have less business travel, so you're going to become more reliant upon international partners and members of an international association to do some of the work that you might have sent a person to do in the past. So I think there's some of the opportunities that immediately spring to mind.
Yeah. Lisa, you've got your eye on a lot of opportunities. I know you've seen some great areas for growth. What's giving you hope for the future for your member firms?
I tell you what gives me hope is because, we talk about sort of anxiety now, but there's also success and excitement now. Not everything has collapsed. Some sectors are having a terribly tough time, but there is already success. There is already excitement. And I think we've got to be very careful when we speak. We don't come sort of self-fulfilling and sort of, spread this fear, Don't worry about what we don't know. Focus on what we do know and keep driving forward. So what I see that gives me hope. People have touched on digital. And as we said, firms have now done what they should have done 3 years ago. But anyway, never caused it. They've gone and done it. And good on them. So what does that mean for them? What does that mean for their clients? Well, it means they're going to be more efficient, right? And they can put costs in much better areas. And that's a really great thing. And that will the implications of that are huge from the staff they employ and the experience they have working with the firm towards the client delivery. So all those things give me hope. And also, our economies always change. I mean, they change faster now than they ever did before. But I mean, if I ask children today to name brand names, they're going to name those companies that didn't exist when I was a kid. And yes, some businesses will fail, but some will innovate. And some new businesses will appear. And guess what? We're the people that are going to be advising these new businesses in probably an exciting new economy. So I think there's so many reasons out there that give us hope. And also, and I know you've said it before, our firms are the emergency services of businesses. So that those suffering, they need us. They need us now. And our firms, or all of our firms, are doing a great job accessing government initiatives. So many reasons. It's we haven't just stopped in our lives, just something has happened and we're managing it.
Yeah. Terry, Lisa's right, isn't she? Whatever the problem, the pain, the project, the opportunity, the plan, the trusted advisor, the accountant is the answer, isn't it? So there's a lot of reasons for hope and a lot of opportunities for recovery and growth.
It's just getting them to realize that, Rob. I mean, accountants are accountants. Okay, so they, as somebody says, you showed them the bed, they'll look under the sheets. Okay, so they're and they are. So it didn't surprise me when we started out that everybody kind of ran to their, to the bunkers and started putting their heads down and wondering what was going to happen. That's fair. The really good firms never do that. I always draw this diagram of a bell curve on my wall when I talk to people here, and I always say at the front you've got people who nothing scares them. They're the great firms, are always going to succeed. The middle's kind of that middle group, that always is going to be wondering what to do next, and it's the kind of the ordinary ones, and you got somebody at the other end who's not going to do anything no matter what. Okay, so we can't be alarmed by that, and so we really when we started this, I reminded everybody, if you remember 9/11 and the reaction worldwide on 9/11. Everybody kind of did the same thing, okay? And then the financial crisis, and I said in 08 and 09, people ran for their buck. Look what came out of it. And I think really good leadership recognizes that there's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity in a lot of things, and it's an opportunity to be of value. And I think accountants forget from time to time their real position. And don't get me wrong, I think managing partners, I used to preach it every day, this is where we're at, this is what we need to do. And you would get that blank stare around the table of the partners in the office about, oh, really? And they wanted to go back and did what they've always done. So I do think that today's modern accountant is going to be better prepared to have more skill sets. Literally the last few days we've been talking about education. And so I can't relate to all of you, but when I was going through the profession, most of the education I got was technical, and most of it was about provided by the state societies or the AICPA. Then all of a sudden, boutique providers started creating and offering different soft skill things. People kind of waded into those casually, but today there are as many soft skill development type L&D providers as there's ever been. that will allow young people, even older partners in their systems, to get a better skill range than they've ever had before. And so I think they sit there and go, I can do this. I'm good. There's other things I can do. There's other things, by the way, I want to do. Okay, than just that. So we've seen a lot of that. We probably have put on more webinars and been asked to put on more webinars by people who do a lot of soft skill presentations about where they want to be and how they want to be developing their consulting pieces. So I think that's the good part, but I also think that's what accountants want today, is the good part. And I think we come out of this with a different look and a more exciting look. I couldn't agree with Paul more. There's going to be more mergers than ever before, because those old guard partners that are still running those firms, they will not figure this out. Okay, and it scares them, and so it's an opportunity for the other firms. We're doing a lot of those discussions right now, by the way. There's a lot of new firms starting up that got a different vision, which is even more fun. And so the membership keeps transitioning and changing and offering different skills. So yeah, people are looking for different things to do, Rob. I mean, they're asking us, what else as a firm should we be doing? Okay, besides what we're doing right now. Okay?
Yeah. Well, here at the Business Development Academy, we train accountants to win business. And there is this new world of remote selling. How do they now sell without going to a networking event and shaking hands and swapping cards? And how do you pitch remotely? And how do you move these conversations forward in a virtual world? And yeah, it is a new skill set.
The thing you got to realize, Rob, is now it gets down to how you recognize and reward the correct people in your organization. Now, get me wrong, it's always been that way. But in all honesty, it's more important today and going forward that you recognize the behaviors you want in your partners and in your senior staff, and you recognize those through some kind of compensation system so that people understand it's not that the other people don't have a role, but you want to reward the skill sets you need for the future today and for the future today. And I think that's going to be their biggest challenge.
Yeah. So Clive, just to wrap this one up, in terms of opportunities, we've had the M&A opportunities. We've had, Lisa talked about the technical capabilities and upskilling those. Terry's talked about upskilling in education and maybe work winning skills. So where do you see the opportunities and where's your hope coming from?
Well, I was listening with interest to what everyone else said, because I recognize all of that. And it just struck me that the firms that are really picking at the opportunities, the firms that I'm really impressed with, are the ones who are taking a counterintuitive position. So I can think of a firm, let's say, I don't want to name, but a firm in the United States and a firm in Canada. The firm in the United States, the crisis hits, and their first thing to do is they fire as many people as they can afford to, because they can see the cash going. They focus on all their transaction stuff. They focus on culling clients they know aren't going to pay. So a very typical approach. Cash is a problem, get rid of cost, right? Firm in Canada says, this is going to be an amazing opportunity. My clients don't care about compliance. They don't care about audit. They don't care about all this stuff. Tax, they're going to deal with that. Maybe they're going to get more time to deal with anyway. They want help and they want advice. So they went out and made themselves the advisor, the trusted advisor, but really the trusted advisor of people who are in trouble. Mm. And with their staff, what they said is, you got a job. We'll find ways. We've got pockets. We're going to get loans. We're going to keep your jobs, because they know that give it 6 months, when this is over, and talent, the fight for talent in the US, in most markets, is huge. They're going to have staff who will remember how well they were treated, how well they were looked at after when they were home. So the managers, the leaders who are looking at the advisory side rather than the compliance side, who are treating their staff as part of the family, to be supported, empowering them, they're the ones who are going to drive ahead, because that was coming anyway. And as Rob and Lisa mentioned, I think the old-fashioned people who don't understand all of that, they're not going to make it. But there's some very exciting firms and some exciting things going on.
Yeah, and accountants have found this newfound confidence in being able to change things very quickly. They're usually not very adept at change. They're not particularly agile, but they can get stuff done now. And these young, hungry cubs coming through are driving that change. And yeah, we sense the optimism in your opportunities. So, okay, let's turn to the future as we draw into land now. Crystal ball time. There is no doubt we're heading into some kind of global recession. The economy is slowing down. When we haven't got a vaccine for COVID anytime soon, we won't be shaking hands. We're social distancing for a while. Lockdown is still in place in many areas. So with all of this in mind, what advice, I'm going to come to you first here, Paul, what advice would you give to firms and individual accountants to cope with the rest of 2020 and indeed what's coming up 2021? Because by all accounts, 2021 is going to be even harder. All of those tax bills that have been deferred are going to come due. All of those loans that have been taken out are going to become repayable. So we've got some tough times coming up. So what's your final words of advice and encouragement?
I think there's something interesting that's happened in the industry over the last 10 years, certainly in like the US and the UK markets, where you've had a lot of firms that have become boutique and very sector specialized.
Yeah.
Now, if the sector you happen to have picked was restaurants or airlines or leisure and entertainment, then you're going to be suffering at the moment. And if you're running one of those businesses, then I expect one of the things you're going to be thinking about immediately right now and for the future is, how can we diversify? How can we merge with something that's a little bit perhaps back to how things used to be before, where you'd have much more general practice? So I think those are the sorts of issues for that type of firm. I think for the general practice type firms that already exist, their issues are going to be, well, how do we select staff? How do we select the next generation of partners? It's very difficult when you're doing it remotely. Terry said something about the remuneration of people. Now, I mean, when I was doing this type of work, it was basically go on a course how to work a room. Well, it's not now how to work a room, it's how to work a virtual meeting. So I think, but it's a different skill set. It is a slightly different skill set. And how do you reward the people that can do that type of thing?
Yeah.
This is what firms are going to think about for the future. I think there's going to be a big issue with cash collections because but for both associations and for clients, by the way, for member firms, because the clients are the ones that are going to struggle first, then the firms are going to struggle, and then it'll be the associations. Because when it comes next year to renewing fees for the association, then I think people are going to be thinking, what is it that I got? And that's why we need to make ourselves very relevant to this business change.
It's a really good point, because they would like the face-to-face conferences and the meetings, and that's where they felt they got their value from membership. But come renewal time, they will be questioning, as Terry hinted, the ROI, the relevance, the value, what am I getting? And hopefully they will renew those, because I can't foresee how they would cope without plugging into a network like yours. Clive, let's come to you. Crystal ball time. We've got some tough times coming up. What advice, encouragement would you give to the people watching, listening, in terms of having to cope with what's coming at them?
I think it's learn from what this crisis has brought. And I think one of the most important things is it brought much more openness and informality in leadership and in teams in companies, as they've started to use these virtual tools, Teams, Zoom, Slack, Skype, whatever tools they're using. They're finding that actually they need to be digging down deep into the talent and already preparing strategically for where they ought to be, and thinking about where they ought to be, not just in 2022, but 2021, but 2022 and beyond, because the ones that are prepared for that, and these were changes I think that were coming, but we were all being too slow about adopting. I think these changes, the smart ones are going to be up there ahead and will be there. And even in the difficult sectors, I mean, as Paul mentioned, who'd want to have a lot of big airline clients right now? They are going to turn around. There will still be airlines in a year's time, and where you are and how you position yourselves with your clients is going to be very important. So, and obviously, I think the biggest thing of all is technology, and it's way beyond just communication stuff that we're dealing. It's artificial intelligence, it's automatic data retrieval systems, all those things. I mean, I think there are huge ways of using the technology to take that much further and to turn around into advisory firms. Very quickly, in the old days when we used to travel, if you remember what airline travel was like, I was in Sydney with an Australian partner, one of the most enlightened and interesting partners there. And he was desperate. He's been trying for years to say, Forget the compliance stuff. Your job, the job where we make the money, where we're going to be in the future, is advisory. And he was banging, he'd had a few drinks and he was practically weeping with frustration. He couldn't get people away from their safety zone in the financial statements and the rest of it. They are now realizing that's it. That is not where it's going to be. And I think that's the big future. And I think that firms who are enlightened and are going to be succeeding are the ones who realize where they're going to have to be.
Yeah, very good. Terry, we're not going back to how we were, are we?
You know what? No, I think, but we are gonna go once again. Is accountants love shiny new toys? They're all going to go way over here to the right, and then they're going to realize that it's a combination. I mean, they can't give up the networking which they value. They've got to remember that they're in a client-focused business, and that clients behave the best when you go out and meet with them. You're not going to be able to Skype or to Zoom or to Teams with your clients forever. People want to touch you. They want to see you. They want to hear what you have to say. They want that interchange, that spontaneous interchange. So for now we're going to do all that, but ultimately they're going to find a balance. Accountants are pretty smart, so I think they're going to find the right balance, and it's going to be, this has been a change. I couldn't agree with everybody more. This has been a change that's kind of been right on the horizon for a long time. Okay. Virtual this, virtual that. It's not as much travel, not as much that. That's been right there, but ultimately there's going to be a balance. We just spent some time kind of forecasting here about should we do a meeting that has both components, the one that allows people who want to travel and want to be there in person to get that part of it, and also allow people to do it who want to do it virtually. It's an economic question with a lot of firms. It's a big savings. So, but I don't think, Rob, you can ever forget the value of sitting with somebody, having a cocktail after 5, whether it's a client or it's whether it's your best, when it's some of your better members who just want to talk, chat, get a feel for it. So yeah. I think it's going to change, but I don't think it's going to change nearly as much as people think. And I did hear something I really agree with is, we can't forget with our members that it's a client-focused business. They have clients they have to deliver to, and we have to remember that we have to provide tools and understanding that allows them to serve the clients. So maybe where the transition came, like Paul said, if you're in that industry that serves the hotels and the travel, there's going to be a big adjustment. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I heard Delta say they don't expect pre-COVID travel to return for 5 years. Okay.
Wow.
But then my thinking was travel had already exceeded everything. I would go to an airport and I thought, where did all the people come from? Okay. So maybe it was already a little out of balance. And, but so if you've selected clients that are in those kind of industries that are heavily affected by this, small, and this is something else Paul said that's right on target. Small firms that had small market clients, they're going to suffer because in the U.S., I think those corner shops are going to have a struggle getting back into business. Okay, so they're vulnerable about when their practices. Now, can we help them, or is the merger or some kind of is that the only way this is going to work? So I think the horizon's going to have some adventure in it because of just the industry's changes. The other day I mentioned in Atlanta, they said the restaurants are open. That's great, but somebody's got to go in there and eat. Okay, so and people aren't, I opened a restaurant the other day. I picked up because we take home one on my way home, and there were like 2 people in there eating, and the restaurant was open. Yeah. So they were saying, "Hey, we're open," but so I think we're in a big transition phase, and I think it's a great opportunity for accountants to say, and as well as us to say, here are the tools you're going to need to help these guys. I think it's going to be an adventure at best, and it's going to have some changes associated with it. But like I said, let's be positive. Let's think through it and realize that we've got to help them. We've got to help these other firms diversify that had some industries that may not be successful. We had firms when the financial crisis was on that were heavy duty in banking. They tried like ever they could to to diversify. It was not easy, and some didn't survive because they couldn't do it because they were in banking. By the way, banking came back. It just didn't come back to the same level. Okay.
Yeah.
And I said there's going to be a lot of adventure. There's no easy answer here. Okay. I recognize Clive said he worked in industry. I ran a company for a while. That side of the desk is very different, right? Isn't it, Clive? I mean, it's a very different side of the desk. It's very different being a managing partner as well than running an association, because your partners now are looking at you to kind of solve the problems while they go to work. So I really think we're going to see restructuring of accounting firms to be more management centered. We're going to see us helping clients with different skills we're going to need to create and lead them to. So we've got to get busy, but on the same hand, that's why we're here. That's what we're doing. It was never meant to sit in an easy chair and rock. Okay.
True enough. True enough. Thank you, Terry. And I love leaving the last word to Lisa, because she always leaves us on such a high, positive note. So what are your perspectives for the coming few years, Lisa?
For the coming few years, what I would recommend firms to do, I think, to start with, is be practical, pulling in what Paul said about client bases and Clive said about service lines, to take a sensible view. You are consultants, consult your own firm and look at what that future should be. Don't worry about what you don't know. People keep asking questions about, when your staff return to work. I'm not worrying about that. When they can return to work, I'll worry about it.
I'm with you. I'm with
I don't know. Right. I've got enough to plan about that I do know. So be practical. Communicating. We haven't mentioned communicating. I know everyone's going to say it's desperately important, but keep communicating to your staff, and because we discussed, some people deal with certainty, uncertainty in different ways. Keep communicating to your clients. And then another comment I would like to make is I think our world continues to change, and I think what we've seen here with COVID, for example, is we've become far more values based as people. Societies, we shop for neighbours and we clap for carers, and this has changed, and suddenly a key worker is someone at the till in the supermarket. Products. I mean, that's suddenly the person you think, you changed my life. Not necessarily the highest paid people. So that has changed, and I believe this has been happening anyway, but I think COVID has put it into perspective. And I very much hope our profession, which has sometimes had sadly, some criticism that I think we have to accept was valid, I hope wakes up and realizes they must get on the front foot, and they must be the advisors to sustainable business. Because even if you look at the source of COVID, you can argue some of that is about sustainable practices. Terry was talking about, is there too much air travel? All of this is skirting around the whole point that I think a lot of societies are now saying, this has got to be sustainable. And our profession should be at the absolute front of this and pushing sustainability reporting and audits, for example. And then I think everything will come together. Our firms will have a future. Our society would be better. And we won't have that struggle for talent, because who wouldn't want to work with firms like that? Yeah.
Goodness me. Any final last minute thoughts that you want to get out of your system before we go, anyone? Well, I want to thank you.
Onward and upward. Let's do it.
Onward and upward. There you go. In 3 words, onward and upward. 3 words for you, Clive. 3 words for you, Paul.
I couldn't. Terry said it.
Well, thank you all so much for your contribution today. We've come to the top of the hour. You've probably got another Zoom call lined up with a whole load of other people, but we've really appreciated your insights, your honesty, your humor, your engagement. You are making a difference with whatever you're doing. So I'm going to say to you all, enjoy your weekend. Try and recharge those batteries and keep this energy going and this positivity. And we'll see you another time. Give us a wave, and you are all free to go.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.